Production conspiracy. The severe production cuts to Event Horizon might not have been about removing excessive gore, but about hiding evidence that would confirm the film's true supernatural nature. The original 130-minute cut that caused test audiences to faint was slashed to 96 minutes, under what director Paul W.S. Anderson described as extreme studio pressure. Theory suggests Paramount didn't just cut for ratings, they removed footage that made the demonic possession too explicit and undeniable. The missing 34 minutes allegedly contained extended crew backstories, showing each member's specific sins and guilt, directly connecting their fates to Christian concepts of personalized damnation. Some fans believe the deleted footage proves the ship was intentionally designed as a hell gateway, rather than an accidental dimensional breach. The studio's insistence on cutting specific scenes while Titanic received extended post-production time suggests they recognized something genuinely disturbing in the material. Test screening reports mention audience members not just leaving, but requiring medical attention, implying the original cut contained imagery that transcended typical horror. This theory proposes the theatrical version was deliberately sanitized to hide proof that Event Horizon depicts actual theological hell, rather than science fiction horror. Warhammer Prequel. Event Horizon might be an unauthorized prequel to Warhammer 40k, and the film's screenwriter partially confirmed it. Philip Eisner admitted in 2017 that he extensively played Warhammer 40k, calling it a definite influence on his script. The theory proposes the crew entered the Warp, the alternate dimension from Warhammer lore where chaos gods and demons exist. In 40k canon, ships require Geller fields to protect crews from the Warp's corrupting influence, preventing demonic possession and madness. The Event Horizon has no such protection, making it humanity's first accidental warp drive, created thousands of years before the Imperium develops proper shielding. The crew's descent into murder and cannibalism perfectly mirrors unshielded warp exposure effects described in Warhammer lore. The timeline aligns, since Event Horizon is set in 2047, while Warhammer 40k spans 38,000 years forward, leaving plenty of time for humanity to forget this early disaster and rediscover warp travel with proper safeguards. The Gothic cathedral architecture matches Imperium vessel design exactly. Demon-possessed Weir behaves identically to Chaos God possession victims in 40k. The Dark Descent prequel introducing Paimon as a demonic king aligns with warp entities from Chaos lore. This theory suggests Event Horizon documents humanity's first contact with Chaos, an event later buried and forgotten, explaining why no one in 40k remembers this early catastrophe. Intentional gateway. Dr. William Weir didn't accidentally create a faster-than-light drive. Theory suggests he deliberately engineered a gateway to hell to reunite with his wife Claire, who died by self-inflicted harm and would be condemned to hell under traditional Christian theology. Weir's complete obsession with the gravity drive, while ignoring Claire's deteriorating mental health, suggests subconscious guilt driving him toward damnation. His opening vision shows Claire beckoning from the ship, implying she's already there waiting for him. The ship's extensive occult symbolism, including Dante's circles and medieval demonic architecture, seems too specific for accidental design. The Dark Descent prequel reveals Paimon influenced Weir's design process through dreams and visions, but some theorists argue Weir consciously invited this influence. His refusal to leave the ship and statement that he's already home suggest this was always his destination, not a trap. The ship's name, Event Horizon, meaning point of no return, could be Weir's acknowledgement that he's crossing into damnation willingly. Weir actively helps the ship trap the rescue crew, rather than warning them away, suggesting collaboration rather than corruption. This theory proposes Weir's grief made him vulnerable to demonic manipulation, but he consciously chose to build the gateway, making him a willing architect of his own damnation, who used science as a tool to reach theological hell. Paimon's domain. Dark Descent prequel, identifying the entity as Paimon, suggests the Event Horizon entered Paimon's specific domain within Hell's hierarchy. In medieval demonology's Ars Goetia, Paimon is listed as a king commanding legions of demons with powers over knowledge, resurrection, and illusion. Theory proposes the gravity drive didn't open a random gateway, but specifically targeted Paimon's realm, either by Weir's design or demonic guidance. Paimon's traditional abilities, including reanimating the dead and conjuring elaborate illusions, perfectly explain the ship's behavior. The comic shows Paimon as eyeless with a trident mark, mirroring Weir's final demonic transformation, suggesting Weir became Paimon's vessel, or avatar. Paimon's influence on Weir beginning long before the mission implies decades of preparation and manipulation. Some theorists argue Paimon specifically chose Weir as his conduit into human space because Weir's grief and guilt made him uniquely vulnerable. The crew's hallucinations matching Paimon's power over illusions suggests he's not possessing the ship, but rather the ship entered his territory, where he has absolute control. This theory frames the entire narrative as Paimon executing a long-planned invasion of human space, using Weir as his unwitting or willing collaborator. Dante's blueprint. The ship's architecture deliberately replicates Dante's 9 circles of hell, suggesting Weir or Paimon designed it as a functional map of damnation. The gravity core's concentric spinning rings mirror Dante's descending circles from limbo through lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, to treachery at the core. Each crew member's death corresponds to specific sins from Dante's structure. Miller's guilt represents the circle of wrath. Peter's abandonment of her son represents treachery. Weir's pride represents heresy. The Latin inscription, Libera te tutemet ex inferis, appears above gateways like Dante's inscription above Hell's entrance. The Gothic cathedral design, based on Notre Dame, creates a perverted religious space. Theory suggests this isn't metaphorical but literal, that the ship functions as a physical manifestation of Dante's hell, where each level inflicts appropriate punishment. The crew must physically descend through increasingly horrific areas, experiencing hell layer by layer. Some theorists argue the ship's structure proves Dante's Inferno was based on actual observations of hell's architecture, making Event Horizon evidence that medieval theology accurately described hell's true structure. This would mean Weir either consciously replicated theological hell's layout, or the dimensional entity reshaped the ship to match, because Dante's vision was genuinely accurate. Psychic predator. The entity isn't supernatural, but an extra-dimensional psychic predator that evolved to feed on human suffering by weaponizing individual guilt. Dr. Stark's theory about a microbial entity with hive mind capabilities suggests biological rather than demonic origins. Each crew member sees personalized hallucinations targeting their specific guilt. Weir sees his wife. Miller sees Coric, whom he abandoned. Peters sees her estranged son. The entity demonstrates detailed knowledge of crew backstories it couldn't possess unless it can read memories and thoughts directly. Theory proposes this being evolved in a dimension where consciousness is primary and physical form is secondary, making it perfectly adapted to psychological warfare. The hallucinations don't just frighten, they drive victims towards self-destruction through calculated emotional manipulation. Peter's vision leads her into deadly corridors. Miller's guilt manifests as the Burning Man attacking him repeatedly. Justin goes catatonic after direct contact with the drive. The ship prevents escape by manipulating electronics and forcing crew toward danger zones. Some theorists argue this entity represents the next stage of predatory evolution, a species that consumes suffering rather than physical matter. It keeps victims conscious during dismemberment to maximize psychological torment. This theory suggests what humans interpret as demonic possession is actually psychic parasitism by an alien intelligence that perceives human minds as food sources. By the way, if you're finding this interesting, I create content like this regularly. Subscribing would really help me out. Time prison. The 7-year gap between disappearance and reappearance might mask a temporal trap where the crew experienced centuries of torture. Black hole time dilation near the gravity drive's event horizon could mean subjective time inside passed at vastly different rates than external time. Theory suggests the crew subjectively experienced hundreds or thousands of years of continuous torture, while only 7 years passed outside. This would explain their complete psychological deterioration and the sheer volume of violence documented in the recovered footage. Alternatively, the crew might have experienced only hours, while years passed outside, discovering they're trapped in a temporal loop that repeats their torture indefinitely. The entity could be using time dilation to extend suffering beyond normal human lifespan limits, effectively creating immortality for the sole purpose of eternal torment. Some theorists propose the ship exists in a pocket dimension, where time flows differently, making escape impossible because rescued crew members would be temporally desynchronized with normal space. The film's refusal to address temporal mechanics might be intentional concealment of this trap. This theory adds scientific plausibility to medieval concepts of eternal damnation, suggesting hell uses physics rather than magic to create infinite suffering. Resurrection hell. The original crew wasn't killed once, but repeatedly resurrected and killed in cycles matching Paimon's necromantic powers. Medieval grimoires describe Paimon's ability to reanimate the dead for years, and theories suggest he used this power on the Event Horizon crew. The video log shows crew members screaming while dismembered in ways that should cause instant death, suggesting supernatural animation of corpses. Some footage appears to show the same crew members in different locations simultaneously, implying multiple instances of the same person. Deleted scenes of crew being dissected while conscious suggest they remained alive through impossible trauma. Theory proposes how 18 crew members created such extensive gore throughout limited ship spaces. They were killed, resurrected, and killed again repeatedly. This matches medieval theology's concept of damnation as eternal torment rather than single death. Paimon demonstrated necromantic control in the prequel, supporting his ability to perform mass resurrection. Weir's continued animation after fatal injuries proves resurrection is possible within the ship's influence. Some theorists argue the crew isn't dead, but trapped in perpetual death-resurrection cycles, suffering infinitely in a literal interpretation of eternal damnation. This explains why the recovered footage seems to show impossibly prolonged torture, because it wasn't hours, but potentially years of repeated killing compressed into the video log. The trap. The distress signal isn't a cry for help, but deliberate bait designed to expand Paimon's reach into normal space. Theory suggests the signal's timing after 7 years of silence and its repetitive pattern were calculated to draw rescue crews. Weir's presence on the ship, despite knowing the danger, suggests he was placed there specifically to guide new victims aboard. His statement that the ship won't let them leave came before anyone boarded, implying foreknowledge of the trap. The entity needs fresh human consciousness to amplify its power and expand its dimensional breach, making each new victim a stepping stone toward full invasion. Medieval demonology describes demons using deception rather than force, tricking humans into entering demonic domains willingly. Paimon's deliberate manifestation in the prequel supports the theory of long-term planning rather than opportunistic possession. Each new crew member brought aboard potentially gives the entity more power to manifest in normal space. The final scene's ambiguity about whether rescue is real suggests the trap might be inescapable. Some theorists propose the Event Horizon is the first move in a dimensional invasion, with Paimon using human psychology against us by exploiting our instinct to rescue others. The ship becomes a Venus flytrap, where noble intentions lead to damnation, and every rescue attempt feeds the entity more consciousness to corrupt. Sight beyond sight. Eyes throughout the film represent the boundary between rational reality and incomprehensible truth beyond human perception. Weir's final line, "Where we're going, you won't need eyes to see," suggests a realm where physical vision is obsolete or misleading. Captain Kilpack, holding out his gauged-out eyes in the final transmission, implies seeing hell requires abandoning human sight. The gravity drive resembles an enormous eye with black pupil and concentric rings, suggesting it's a viewing portal into another dimension. Weir's wife appears eyeless throughout his visions, as does Paimon in the prequel. Theory proposes eyelessness isn't mutilation but transformation, that those who've truly seen the dimensional realm no longer need or want human eyes. The corridors, shaped like eyes, force the crew to travel through metaphorical vision. Some theorists argue the entity exists on a perceptual plane, where physical sight actively prevents understanding, making human vision a limitation rather than advantage. The more you see with eyes, the less you comprehend about the truth. Removing eyes might represent transcendence to perception beyond light and matter. This theory suggests the entity doesn't hide from sight, but exists in a spectrum humans cannot perceive with biological eyes, and those who abandon sight gain access to reality's true nature, however horrifying. False rescue. Stark's rescue might be an elaborate illusion, and she's still trapped, experiencing infinite false escapes. The final scene showing helmeted rescuers could be demonic manifestations rather than real humans. When one removes his helmet, revealing Demon Weir, Stark screams and wakes with Cooper. But theory suggests this wasn't waking from nightmare, but descending into deeper illusion. The door closing automatically afterwards suggests continued supernatural influence. Stark never physically encountered Demon Weir during events, yet visualizes his form perfectly, implying psychic connection independent of observation. If the entity can create one false rescue scenario, Nothing prevents infinite repetition. Original script versions had darker endings, where screams continued during supposed rescue, implying no actual escape occurs. Theory proposes Stark will experience false rescues perpetually, never knowing which, if any, are real. This represents ultimate cruelty. Not death, but uncertainty about reality itself. Some theorists argue everyone who thinks they escaped remains trapped in personalized illusions, with the entity showing each victim elaborate false realities. The rescue could be the entity's most sophisticated psychological weapon, giving hope before crushing it repeatedly. This theory suggests the forward section never actually separated, that the entire escape sequence occurs within crew members' minds while their bodies remain on the ship, experiencing endless torture masked by comforting illusions. Willing fusion. Weir's transformation might not be possession, but conscious merger with Paimon to reunite with Claire in damnation. Throughout the film, Weir is drawn toward the gravity core as if something he desires is calling him. His calm acceptance of transformation contrasts sharply with other crew members' terror, suggesting he's not being violated but embracing something. When threatened with abandonment, Weir claims he's already home, indicating he views the ship as destination rather than prison. The prequel shows Paimon courting Weir through dreams rather than forcing corruption, implying consensual relationship. Theory suggests Weir's obsessive work while Claire deteriorated created guilt that made damnation preferable to living with his actions. His final transformation, showing complete physical change, proves he's not merely possessed but fundamentally altered. Weir alone communicates with the entity rather than just being victimized, suggesting partnership. Some theorists propose Weir consciously chose fusion with Paimon as the only way to reach Claire in Hell, viewing merger as reward rather than punishment. His transformation becomes apotheosis, elevating him to demonic status in exchange for service. This theory frames Weir as a tragic figure who loved so deeply that he chose damnation over separation, making him accomplice in his own corruption, driven by grief that transcended sanity and morality. Authorized Experiment. The original crew might have been expendable test subjects in an authorized government experiment to open dimensional gateways. The official cover story claiming reactor meltdown, while the ship actually disappeared, suggests institutional knowledge and deliberate misdirection. Theory proposes the government and military knew the gravity drive's true purpose, opening doorways to other dimensions for potential colonization or resource extraction. The crew was sent without full knowledge of consequences, treated as acceptable losses in pursuit of technological breakthrough. Weir hiding information from the rescue crew proves pattern of institutional secrecy. The 7-year delay before rescue suggests authorities knew the ship was lost, but waited to see if anyone survived before risking more personnel. The original crew's final transmission warning to free yourself from hell implies they gained awareness of where they were, suggesting the dimension's hellish nature was unexpected, but not the dimensional travel itself. Some theorists argue this represents Cold War-era ethics, where human experimentation was authorized at highest levels. The ship's massive scale and resources exceed what's needed for simple space travel, implying military application. This theory adds conspiracy layer, suggesting Event Horizon wasn't tragic accident, but calculated sacrifice of expendable crew to test technology that superiors knew might open gateways to hostile dimensions, with human lives considered acceptable research costs. If this was worth your time, think about subscribing so you catch every new video. Thanks for watching.